Hi, everybody. My name is John Huffman. I just dropped my notes. I'm afraid that after all these other guys being so good, I'm going to sound like a blithering idiot to you. But I was a senior in high school going to Washington High School down the street here, at least it was Washington High School then, when my cousin bribed me to come to church and told me that there was free food on Wednesday night, hence name Chow and Chatter, and good-looking girls. And there was, both of those things. And I was invited to come to the Foursquare Church. Now, I was raised at All Saints Catholic Church, never been to another church ever until I was invited to come to the Foursquare Church. And the only thing I knew about Foursquare was the game you play with a big red rubber ball on the playground. And I think for the first 6 months, I called it the Score Fair Church. But I remember that the one requirement for Chow and Chatter, and some of you guys that were in the youth group then remember that you had to go to church on Wednesday night and go to the Wednesday night service. That was the requirement. So I came to church, and it was in the sanctuary next door before they built this building, and there is now remember, I was raised in a church where they just had priests and robes and clerical collars. I walked in, here's this silver fox up there, who has a pink shirt on and this crisp blue. He loved pink shirts. I think he must have been an autumn or something. And he was speaking, and at the end of the service, I didn't know this. I didn't know it was a prayer meeting, but at the end of the service, he invited everybody to come up front and pray. And there were probably 500 people there that night, and everybody goes down to pray, except me. I'm the only guy. I didn't even know what they were doing. And I stood in the back, probably, 6, 7 rows back. Everybody went forward. Everybody was praying. And finally, reluctantly, I just thought, well, I'm not going to be the only idiot standing here. So I went down there, knelt in the very back. And as soon as I knelt down, a girl about 3 feet over from me jumps up, bolts up, and starts giving a message in tongues. I'd never even heard of a message in tongues. To me, it sounded like, hey, bada, 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 or hey, kitty, kitty. I mean, it was like, are you kidding me? I mean, and I had fairly long hair at the time, and it was standing on end, man. I was like, you've got to be kidding me. And so the guy with the silver hair started giving what I was told later was the translation. I found out it was the interpretation, and it just completely freaked me out, so much so that I looked for the exits, and there were these big guys standing by the exits. I found out later they were just ushers, but I thought they were security. And, so after the service, I'm like, I got to get out of here. And Kathy, who I went to high school with, we were in the same grade, grabbed me and introduced me to the guy in the pink shirt. And for whatever reason, I can't even tell you that why it was, but he took a liking to me, and it began my relationship with Jesus. And it was under Dr. Hamilton's ministry in the building next door that he preached, and I received what I felt was a call to ministry. And I'm sure he was wearing a pink shirt that day too. By the way, can I just stop and tell you that Joan told me I could take as long as I want because I'm last. So we'll be here till Good Friday. No, But he took an interest in me and wanted to get me, once I felt called to ministry, he felt he wanted to baptize me in some of the things I needed to know. So I think it was the spring of the year before I went to Bible college. He invited me to go to a service down at the Pacific Auditorium on a Sunday. I didn't know anything about it. I didn't even know if it was a church service or what. But we're driving down there. I'm in the front seat, and he starts telling me that he's the chairman on the committee of this crusade called the Catherine Kuhlman Crusade. I'd never heard of Catherine Kuhlman. I knew who the Pope was. That was it. So he starts telling me about her ministry, and I was a little dubious, I got to tell you. And then by the time I got near, he said, I want you to meet her. And so I was thinking, I'm pretty sure he wanted some things to rub off on me. It never really quite worked. But we went, and he introduced me to her. And that afternoon, I saw the power of God like I'd never seen the power of God before. And I would go every Sunday. I'd sit in the front row, and I would watch him, and I would do everything that he did. I was floored by the kind of love he had. Most pastors will, I've learned this now that I pastored, pastors will call their church the church or the people. He always called everybody, and you remember this, loved one. And when I pastored, and I was a privileged pastor for 23 years, I used that word all the time with our congregation, and everybody loved it until Doc came down to speak a number of times once he quit pastoring here, and everybody knew that I got it from him, so they knew it wasn't even original. I mean, this place, let's be honest, this church was a mega church before they even had the name. Now, the thing that drew me the most to Dr. Hamilton was the hair, man. I mean, let's be honest. You know, I remember one year, my only summer camp I ever went to at Camp Crestview, it's like 3 in the morning, and I'll just rat you out now, Dennis, because Dennis led a charge of the youth group. Guys in the youth group, Lonnie was there. Dennis led the charge. We went out and stole the bell by the pool at Camp Crestview. And I'm pretty sure Lonnie was carrying it, but we started running away with the bell that they called everybody to dinner with, and Lonnie dropped the bell, and it clanged everywhere. And the guest speakers in those days would stay in these really nice motorhomes down by the pool. Well, as soon as this bell went crazy all over the place, I think it fell in the pool, frankly, out came the guest speakers. Dr. Roy Hicks Sr. was there. Dr. Hamilton was there. Roy Hicks Jr. was there. Roy Hicks Sr. comes running out. You know, his hair, 3 in the morning, his hair is everywhere. It's like not Doc, he comes out perfect. 3 in the morning. You kidding me? So I'm thinking, come on. So years later, I had the privilege of taking Doc and Joan with us to Israel. And he'd been speaking at our church a number of times since then, and everybody loved the guy. I mean, just loved him. Didn't care really that much for me, but loved him. And so we get to the Jordan River, and we have about 50 people that want to get baptized in our tour group. And I asked Doc if he'd help me. And he's probably 70 by now, and he braved the water was cold, man. And he got in there, and you know, you're baptizing people in a river that is flowing, and there's water flying everywhere. He baptized 10 people. His hair is still perfect. I mean, there's water everywhere. It was unbelievable. And so my one dream in life was to walk up to the guy one day and just mess his hair up. But I was pretty convinced that there would be a fire torch from heaven for messing with God's anointed. And you've heard everybody say it. How can you even state the impact of a guy like Alan Hamilton? For years, I called him Dr. Hamilton. It wasn't until we got into ministry, several years, I never called him Alan. I was too afraid of that. I started calling him Doc. But our church had some relative success where I pastored. We started with about 9 people, grew to several thousand. We planted quite a few churches over the years that grew astronomically, amazingly. And I was always in uncharted territories, and I would call him, same thing, you know, it'll be okay. The pastoral advice that he would give was unbelievable. And I'll give you an example of the kind of impact this guy had. When Doc and Joan went to Israel with us, we walked into this one area where there was a church, and nobody knows him over there. He's in Israel. And Joan grabs a violin and starts playing and has a crowd of 200 Israelis over here in this one corner. I turn around. Now, we only have about 75 people in our group, and Doc is preaching a sermon, and there's 300 people over there. And I'm like, hey, I'm the leader of this tour. Could I maybe speak here? And I was in the Philippines once speaking. We started a few churches in the Philippines. I had known that Doc had been in the Philippines, but I'm speaking to a group of maybe 3,000 pastors, and I just mentioned Doc's name, Alan Hamilton's name, just in passing. And the place erupts in applause. I wasn't even talking about him, really. I just mentioned his name. Found out later that a lot of these guys had been students in the Bible college or kids in the churches that had come to Christ under his ministry. It makes me want to cry today. I'm in Brazil 10 years later. And by now, we've been going down there. We started a number of indigenous churches there. And I'm a little bit of a celebrity in Brazil. I just want you to know. And so I'm speaking at a conference. I didn't know who all the other guest speakers were. And I got to tell you what kind of celebrity it's kind of like Ron Burgundy says, I'm kind of important. So I was. I mean, I got the early sessions. And then Doc, who was one of the speakers who I did not know, walked out on the stage. Place blew apart. He was a rock star. I think they loved his hair and his pink shirt. The guy was a rock star. I'd get these, amens once in a while. He'd get a standing ovation for everything that he said. And so I got to tell you, I owe everything in my life and my ministry to Dr. Alan Hamilton. And because of and you've heard it all over the world, what happens in Ventura. There are thousands of people that have been touched by Christ and come to Christ as a result of his ministry and his input in somebody as simple as me. What a life. I mean, what a life. I was ordained in this room right down here to preach the gospel, and because Doc was the chairman of the Foursquare Convention that year, he prayed and ordained me, and I'll never forget that. And the last thing I want to do is stand behind Doc in heaven when the rewards are handed out. Can you imagine? It could happen, by the way, Hamilton, Huffman. It could happen. And they do it in alphabetical order. I mean, can you imagine when they go through his whole lineage of things, crown after crown after crown? Huffman, give him a signet ring. That's it. I mean, I'm going to get it. But so, when I think of a verse that would be perfect for Dr. Hamilton, I think of Luke 21:18. Not a hair on your head will perish. No, that's not it. That's not. It's actually 1 Timothy 4:16. Listen to this if you don't already have it memorized. Pay close attention to yourself and to your teaching. Persevere in these things, for as you do this, you will ensure salvation first for yourself and for those who hear you. What an incredible life. And I'm going to ask you to do something with me, because I really do think it's appropriate. And besides, what are they going to do? Throw me out of here? I've been thrown out of worse places than this before, But not that I've ever seen this done, but under the recommendation of his daughter, Kathy, I think this would be so appropriate. How about we give an applause for Doc and for his life? Yeah. Go ahead and be seated. If it's true, I've heard this theology that when you get to heaven, you're 33 and a half years old. Can you imagine how perfect his hair is at 33 and a half? Just finally, I just want to say, I can't tell you the number of services I was in when Doc, and he did this in our church in Ventura, he would have altar call after altar call for people to come to Christ. And a number of times, some of you guys remember this better than I do, he would ask the question, do you know my Jesus? Would you trust my Jesus? Would you give your heart to my Jesus? And I think the reason he did that, not because he just knew it was the real Jesus, of course, but he understood what Paul said, follow me as I follow Christ. It was the real deal. So I thought, I wanted to give anybody here an opportunity. Maybe you're here, most of us are believers, I'm sure, but maybe there's somebody here that's never opened their heart to Jesus, or maybe you're here and you're a part of the youth group back in the day, or a part of the church back in the day, and you've fallen away from those things and maybe not nearly as so serious about them as you used to be. I just want you to remember his words. Do you know his Jesus? Would you trust his Jesus? Would you return to his Jesus? And if that's something that you want to do, I'm going to encourage you after the service is over is find one of the family members, find one of Pastor Randy over here or Greg over here, who, by the way, has the great hair like Dr. Hamilton, Greg. It's amazing to me. I did not get that gene. Find them and tell them, today was the day that I came back to my Jesus because of Dr. Hamilton's Jesus. God bless you guys.